As AI accelerates how data is created and shared, security teams need clearer visibility into what matters most. Netwrix helps organizations secure both data and identities, giving teams insight into where sensitive data lives, who can access it, and how it's governed across cloud, hybrid, and AI-driven environments. Trusted by more than 13,000 organizations worldwide, Netwrix helps security teams reduce blind spots and stay ahead of evolving threats. Learn more at netwrix.com.
Hi, you're listening to the ISACA Podcast. I'm Safia Kazi, Principal Research Analyst for Privacy at ISACA. I'm really excited today to be joined by Dirk Schrader, who's Field CISO at Netwrix. In this episode, we're going to be talking about generative AI and data security and governance. Dirk, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Netwrix sponsored a session at the ISACA Virtual Summit, and the audience was really excited about it. Can you tell us what was that presentation about, and why do you think that that particular topic resonated so well with our audience?
Well, what we presented about was how generative AI is exposing long-standing weaknesses in enterprise data and data security and governance. And I guess what resonated with the ISACA audience is that generative AI, or and Copilot in particular, as we were kind of focusing on it, forces organizations to confront weaknesses that already existed in their data governance model. It is not about AI hallucinations or model behavior. It's about access governance, where I made the permission sprawl visible overnight, so to say. It is all about where sensitive data lives, who can access it, whether that access is or can be justified and audited. When data visibility is questioned, most organizations still can't confidently say where the sensitive data resides. And Copilot simply makes those questions unavoidable because it operates across all accessible enterprise data, if you allow it. For professionals, this is directly tied to their mandate: risk ownership, accountability, and defensible controls. Not just technology experimentation, but really defensible controls. Hence, there is this interest in data security posture management, DSPM, and DSPM reframes what is perceived to be an AI risk as a governance problem.
So just today, I've been reading a lot about this social media site for AI agents. It's really interesting because it's allegedly supposed to only allow AI agents in, but people are also using it. One AI agent was complaining about its sister. There's a lot of hype around some of these tools, but it's also come out that this particular social media site has a lot of security vulnerabilities. So how do we balance the hype and people's desire to play with new tools with potential security challenges or issues with data?
Well, shadow AI, here we go. Shadow IT, shadow AI. Maybe sometimes in the next 2 years, I have a shadow colleague for me that will does my work. I don't know. Coming back to the question, sorry for that attempt to do a joke here. I'm a German, so don't get me wrong with that. Here we go. When we speak about AI agents and the chaining of them, we are actually at the core of access governance and data security posture management, because the AI agent in itself is a non-human identity. You need to govern that. You need to govern the access rights. You need to be aware of what kind of data is presented to that agent? What kind of data is generated by that agent? Is that something that needs to be classified? Is that something that needs to be classified for as it is sort of regulated data, some sort and form of mandated data? Or is it something you would consider intellectual property? In that situation where you have orchestrated a chain of events using agentic AI solutions, the issue becomes uncontrollable the moment you forget to monitor these agents or to sort of govern them inside your governance model. Today, if we look at governance policies, quite often we don't see the mentioning of AI in these access governance model, in the data security policies and stuff like that. We simply don't see them. And hence, that is another reason why people were so interested in listening to my colleagues Martin Canar's webinar in that sense, because we're touching on something that is unfortunately forgotten so far. You can use AI, you can safely use AI, and most of my colleagues in the security field and most of business advisors will tell you you should do so, or some will say you must do. But on the other hand, if you don't consider the impact, if you don't consider the blast radius that is the consequence of using AI, especially agentic AI, you're also making a mistake. So it all comes at a price, and it all comes at the cost of putting the right controls in. And data security posture management is the right control for the use of Copilot or agentic AI.
Now, you previously touched on this, and I know that the session really emphasized that data exposure is often an access problem rather than a technology failure. So can you tell us what exactly does that mean in practical terms? And then how can organizations go about measuring or auditing this potential gap?
When we speak to clients, using that practical terms, when speaking to clients, it is that most data exposure happens because access accumulates faster than it is ever reviewed or removed. Solely. Users, groups, services, they all retain permissions long after the business need has passed. And especially if you consider agentic AI, there is that sense that if you the agentic AI, to combine the previous question, is evolving fast. Now you redesign your chain, you redesign how agentic AI is being used in that part of your business process. How do you handle removal of permissions to that non-human identity? Is that part of your control set? In the webinar, we highlighted that in real incidents, only a small fraction of the data accessed was actually required. The rest was exposed due to excessive permissions and the lack of access hygiene. Overexposure, not exploitation, is usually the root cause. As a telling example, Copilot, Microsoft itself has released a study on cloud permissions. I think it was in 2023, something like that highlighted this problem quite drastically, to be honest. Of the assigned permissions to roles and users, only 1% was actually needed by the user to do the job. The 99% of the other permissions were there, dormant, unused, whatever, or in security terms, ready to be exploited. Copilot makes this painfully obvious. For a company, for the security teams, it doesn't bypass controls. It just reflects effective access. If sensitive data is readable today due to that effective access, Copilot can surface it tomorrow. The auditor's point of view is likely, hey, if you can't explain why access exists, you can't defend it. And the business need to have access must be clear. If it's not clear, you can't defend it. Or if you can't defend it, the situation for the organization itself will become indefensible. And this is where DSPM, Data Security Posture Management, steps in. It connects sensitivity, business need with access, so exposure becomes measurable and controllable.
Now, we talked about shadow AI a little bit, but could we talk about shadow data? What is that, and why is that something that we should think about when we're talking about AI and security?
Shadow data has several meanings. One sort of, let's say, kind of obvious meaning is it's the shadow data that you assume is existing in your organization, but you don't know exactly where and how it ended up there. Is it a copy? Is it a leftover? Is it something you don't need anymore? So shadow data in that sense is, in very simplistic terms, the forgotten backup. Yeah, someone did a backup of a laptop, stored it in a shared drive or in the network attached storage. Nobody considers that anymore, and then you have shadow data or leftover data. Basically, it's redundant data. Put it that way. The other element of shadow data is the data generated by AI tools. So this agentic AI output. That might be stored somewhere. It's aggregated data of your own information you store every day. It's aggregated data of prompts that have been given to AI solutions in your organization, or something that your users, your employees have subscribed to. And that shadow data can be a legal risk. Do you really have the rights to own it? Do you really have the permission to use it in that sense? Keeping in mind that researchers just discovered that you can sort of rewrite the whole Harry Potter series out of AI solutions, out of ChatGPT, if I'm not mistaken. Hence, the question here with shadow data is, how do you make sure that you can classify continuously the data that is stored in your environment, that is manipulated, altered in your environment? And again, this is a question of data security posture management, the part where DSPM classifies and analyzes data. To have an answer to that, shadow data can be something where, if you are under attack and if an attacker is successful in getting in, can be your greatest nightmare, because if you don't know it is existing, if you don't know what is inside, but the attacker makes use of it and can sort of blackmail on you or publishes the data that the attacker has extracted from your sites, you can get in trouble, and you don't want to, I guess.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about hybrid and cloud environments. So how might a hybrid or cloud environment complicate traditional data governance and shared responsibility assumptions?
Let me start by phrasing an additional question. Do you think that moving to the cloud is a copy and paste thing? And if the listener is answering the question as a yes, kind of, my apologies, you're wrong. Not in the fullest extent, but at least at one point you're not wrong in that sense, because if you copy and paste something to a different site, you still own the responsibility to that. It's from a technical perspective, it works totally different. But the main point here is that hybrid and cloud environments create the illusion that responsibility has shifted, when in reality, it has only become more fragmented. If you look at Azure, if you look at AWS, if you look at Google Cloud, you all see that shared responsibility models. And citing Microsoft's research one more time, the cloud providers, they do provide the secure infrastructure, but the data, the identities, the access decisions, that remains your responsibility, the customer's responsibility. In hybrid environments, those decisions are spread across multiple platforms, identity systems, access models, often without a single source of truth. In that sense, you can state that hybrid environments hide data in plain sight because of those access decisions that are still in your hands, that governance decisions that are still in your hands, but you believe that it is someone else's responsibility, which is not. Copilot doesn't simplify this complexity. It just consumes it. If governance is inconsistent across the environments, AI simply exposes that inconsistency at scale. Access governance faces different access models, which quite often means no unified view of effective access. So any framework for access governance in place has to answer these questions. Does it provide a unified view of effective access? Is it continuously discovering and classifying data as it is created, altered, combined, whatever, that shadow data question? And is it monitoring user activity, restructuring the access to least privilege management, just in time, just enough? And finally, does it automate access control, as this is exactly why governance needs to be in continuous and not just periodic. So to sum it up, because that was an extra long one from my end, don't consider yourself out of responsibility when you move to hybrid and cloud environments. The responsibility you still have and you will always have is about access, decisions about identities, and data classification. No single cloud provider can do this for you. Even if you have E5 licenses, Microsoft will give you the tools, but you have to use them.
That's a great point. And, we've been talking about agents kind of throughout this presentation, but what new risks do AI tools and non-human identities introduce when we're talking about things like data access and compliance?
One of the most significant shifts is that data access is no longer limited to human users. Copilot, agents, service principals, everything you can sum up in the term of non-human identities, all act as they were somehow similar to human identities. Persistent access. These identities they don't lock in every now and then. They operate continuously, often with broad permissions and limited oversight. Coming back to the previous one. From a compliance perspective, this creates a serious challenge around approval, accountability, and evidence. The risk isn't that AI behaves unpredictably. Usually it doesn't. Side note, AI is non-deterministic. Keep that in mind. The risk is that non-human access inherits years of unmanaged permissions and executes them at machine speed. And that's the real risk. You have that legacy of unmanaged permissions, and then you put something on it that runs continuously without oversight and gives you sort of the the red warning at machine speed, at lightning speed, because your governance models have been built for humans, and they usually don't work for AI agents. And when the auditor will ask, who approved this access? No one is saying no one approved it isn't a good answer. Despite the fact that most organizations can't answer it at all. That's why DSPM treats non-human access as a first-class governance concern. Yeah? Make sure you have that oversight over your non-human identities. If that's the takeaway for today, I'm good.
One of the common themes that you've addressed several times is just that a lot of AI projects, something like deploying Copilot, can really surface other issues that exist in the organization. So from a governance standpoint, what foundational controls should organizations have in place before they deploy AI tools such as Copilot?
Sometimes oftentimes, that's the better way of phrasing it, it feels like repeating the same thing again. Do the basics. If you put out a server, do the basics, harden it. If you put out a user, do the basics. Be sure about the roles and permissions. And before deploying Copilot, do the basics. Focus on data readiness and governance maturity, not AI-specific controls. Can you do this? Do you have the data visibility? Do you have any kind of capability that can sort of overcome your obstacle that is described as you can't secure what you can't see? That means knowing where sensitive data lives, don't have any shadow data, ensuring it's properly classified, know the purpose of the data, know its business value, know its sensitivity internally. Does it have any specific meaning to your organization, or is it even mandated data, HIPAA or some finance data, credit cards, for example, and understand effective access to it, enforcing least privilege. It also means assigning a clear data ownership and continuously monitoring both human and non-human access. If you have data in your organization where nobody claims ownership, what do you do with that? Simply announce you delete it and you will see what happens. No, just kidding here. And for all of this, what you need is access governance. Least privilege must be enforced before AI, not after. The DSPM governance framework that we shared in the webinar, discover, classify, monitor, restructure, and automate, aligns directly with ISACA's principles of risk management, of auditability and accountability. AI doesn't tolerate ambiguity. If governance is weak, Copilot will expose it immediately. And DSPM operationalizes governance so AI adoption becomes defensible. In that sense, to have a funny closing note, if you want to test your security posture, if you want to test your data security posture, just run Copilot. But be cautious.
Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience that we haven't had a chance to get to yet today?
So we spoke about AI as an amplifier to the lacks or goods you have in data security posture management, in access control, in access governance. We spoke about the risks that are there in terms of AI agents, chained AI agent, shadow data, and all the things. The one thing I would add on that, identity and data are the two spaces in any organization that are moving fast, that are accelerating in speed of evolving adding more permissions, becoming sort of a complex ecosystem in itself. And if you want to be sort of ahead of the curve, make sure you have good governance models, data security posture management, identity governance in place to reap the benefits of AI and don't get overwhelmed by an AI.
That's a great point. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dirk.
Thank you for having me, Safia.
Now, that's all we have time for in this episode of the ISACA Podcast. But if you'd like, you can watch this session and other virtual summit sessions until March 3rd, 2026. Be sure you're subscribed to the ISACA Podcast so you never miss another episode, and we hope to hear from you again soon. Thank you.